Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Putting Palestine on the Ballot, Vote Palestine's mass mobilizing call. Thank you all for being here with us to talk about the Vote Palestine campaign, to talk about how we're going to bring the momentum and the power that we've built as a movement over the last 17 months into the federal election. My name is Yara, and I'm an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement. And on tonight's call, we're going to be talking about how we can make Palestine unavoidable this federal election. So, this call is coming at a really critical time. As we know, Israel has recently broken its ceasefire agreement and resumed its genocidal campaign against the people of Gaza, killing over 1,000 people in just the last month. In the West Bank, in places like Jenin and Tulkarem, we've actually seen Israel accelerate its assault on these cities and on these camps, essentially completely destroying or working to completely destroy parts of the West Bank. And while Israel continues to engage in this violence against Gaza and the West Bank, it's also escalating its violence in Lebanon, breaching the ceasefire in South Lebanon, as well as continuing to coordinate with the United States and other actors on the bombing of Yemen. And so now more than ever, we have a major responsibility here to continue the fight, to fight for a full arms embargo against Israel and to challenge Canada's complicity in this genocide. So this call is in two parts. First, we're going to hear from a number of speakers about why and how we can put Palestine on the ballot and build power beyond the federal election. Then we're going to break down all the ways that you can organize in the local level to build power between you and your neighbors and pressure your candidates to end Canada's complicity in this genocide. This will include going over our pledge system for the Vote Palestine campaign, flyering and postering, asking questions of your candidates, and also the importance of canvassing. And at the end of this call, we'll talk about how to make an informed decision about who to vote for in your local context. But we want to be really clear from the outset that we don't believe that elections are the path to liberation, whether for Palestinians or for anybody else. But what elections give us is this really useful window in which we can organize and build our collective power. In the weeks leading up to this election, people are engaged politically and organizing around issues that matter most to them. And this particular election is really important because over the last 17 months of mass organizing, we've actually been able to build a movement that has really acted as a force in the realm of Canadian politics and power. In the last 17 months, we've organized within our communities. We've brought people into the movement who joined their first protest, who've committed to learning about Palestine and to participating in the struggle for Palestinian liberation. We've made it clear to candidates or to the political members of parliament or even candidates or political candidates at the local level that they're not going to be able to enter our communities, whether those be our cultural communities, our religious communities, labor communities, and so on, campuses, without being met with some kind of questioning and opposition to the role that they've played in allowing for Canada to continue its arms sales to Israel. And so we cannot allow for, in this federal election, politicians to walk back into our communities and ask for our votes without leveraging our power and bringing together this mass movement that we've built in order to make Palestine a key election issue. Now, before I introduce our incredible line of speakers, I want to take a few minutes to just tell you all about the Vote Palestine campaign. So Vote Palestine is a coalition made up of organizations all across the country that have been building power together and that are really taking steps or that are supporting a platform called the Palestine Platform, which I'm going to explain in just a moment. But first, a few basic facts. The next federal government is going to either continue Canada's uncritical support for Israel, right, which has involved sending weapons or continuing its weapons exchange, which has involved repressing Palestinian and pro-Palestine organizing, which has involved offering diplomatic cover to Israel's genocide. So this next federal government will either continue along this route, or it's going to take steps to hold Israel accountable to something, right? To international law, to the demands of the arms embargo movement, and so on. And all of this depends entirely on our ability to organize and to create crisis around Canadian complicity in this genocide. This also means that every day until the election day, people in our communities are talking about politics. So it's a moment for us to raise the profile of our issues and bring people into our movement. This election, the Vote Palestine campaign and our organizations are taking an organizing approach to the federal election, which means using the election period to plug people into local organizations to make sure that Action for Palestine doesn't stop during the federal election and certainly doesn't stop when the votes are counted. So regardless of who's elected, we're going to continue to fight, we're going to continue to struggle, and we need to continue to build power and mobilize to end Canada's complicity in Israeli genocide and to fight for a free Palestine. So in short, our aims are threefold. First of all, we're going to make Palestine and Canada's complicity in this genocide a key election issue. And we really have already been doing that with this campaign. Second, we're going to organize in our communities to expand the Palestine solidarity movement and build lasting power for Palestinian liberation. And third, we're going to mobilize and pressure all candidates across party lines to endorse the Palestine platform. And we're going to do this by getting as many people as we know to pledge, and we'll talk more about this pledge later, to encourage their candidates to sign up or to sign onto the Palestine platform. And we've got, over 400 people on this call. So if you haven't pledged, please take the time to go on votepalestine.ca and pledge. And after this call is done, circulate that pledge amongst everyone that you know. Let's fill up those candidate inboxes to make it clear to them that we're making Palestine an election issue. And at the level of organization, the number of pledge signatures is going to persuade and agitate candidates around the Palestine platform, but it's also going to be a way for us to bring our communities together, to be able to participate in calls like this and town halls and other kinds of tactics that we'll talk about at the end of this call. And so really, just to kind of move us along, just want to close off by saying that we're using this election really as a window to grow this movement, to expand our power so that no matter who forms government at the end of this month, they will have to face an increasingly powerful movement committed to Palestinian liberation. And so I want to talk a little bit about the platform itself, because the Palestine platform is basically the basis of the Vote Palestine campaign. And this was developed by Palestinian-led organizations and their solidarity partners in consultation with the Palestinian community. And it's really grounded in major demands that the movement has been making over the last 17 months. So, of course, by now, we've all heard the demand for arms embargo. In fact, this has become like a key slogan of the movement. And it's really something that I think is tangible, and it's also our responsibility as people who are in North America, in countries that are actively engaged in the arms trade with Israel, to fight to stop the flow of weapons. And so naturally, our first demand is for Canada to impose a two-way arms embargo on Israel. We've also seen over the course of the last 17 months, significant amounts of repression against the Palestine movement, whether it be through the arresting of protesters, whether it be through attempts at censorship around Nakba and around the incredible organizing that Palestinian students and parents are doing on campuses and even in high schools and elementary schools. The second demand is to address anti-Palestinian racism and to protect freedom of expression on Palestine in order to allow for our movement to continue to grow and to continue to fight. The third demand is to protect and fund Gaza relief efforts. We know that Gaza is facing one of the worst crises we've seen over the last 17 months, that Israel has destroyed over 85% of Gaza's infrastructure. And the movement has been consistently demanding for Canada to play a role in protecting and funding Gaza relief efforts, including the continued funding of the UN Refugee Works Agency, UNRWA, which we've seen under attack, not only by the United States, but also at various points by this Canadian government. The fourth demand is to end Canadian involvement in illegal Israeli settlements, a key demand particularly in light of the ongoing attacks that we've been seeing on the West Bank over the course of the last 17 months, settler violence, the increased settler violence, and also the fact that, Israeli corporations have actually been setting up land sale events within our own communities, all across Canada. And so we're calling on the Canadian government to end Canadian involvement in illegal Israeli settlements. And we're also calling on Canada to recognize the state of Palestine. So already we have nearly 220 organizations and nearly 220 candidates and over 200 organizations that have endorsed this platform. So meaning we effectively have 220 candidates running in this election that have pledged to all 5 program points, and over 200 incredible organizations all across this country that have said that this platform is a platform that they'll be advancing within their own organizations and amongst their own membership. And we have close to 12,000 individuals that have pledged that this upcoming federal election, they will be supporting the Palestine platform, meaning this platform is going to inform how they vote. These are the basic demands, but we know that these demands are not going to result in a free Palestine, that the final goals of the struggle for Palestinian liberation will be created by Palestinians in Palestine and will not be the outcome of this federal election. But we firmly believe that Israel, as an apartheid state that is engaging in a genocide, needs to be held accountable. So we're not positing a two-state solution. We're not calling for, these 5 demands to be the end all and be all of the Palestine movement. In fact, we know the Palestine movement has set the ceiling very high, and has made it clear that it is calling for the total liberation of Palestine. But the immediate step right now, with Netanyahu having broken the ceasefire, is an immediate and permanent ceasefire. And the tangible way to do that, because we know that so many members of the Canadian political class have already called for a ceasefire, but their words are merely platitudes when the weapons continue to flow to Israel. And so really, we are coalescing around these 5 program points, specifically because we see these program points as some of the most critical and immediate steps that we can take as a movement in order to push Canada to end its complicity in Israel's genocide. So who's behind the platform? The platform and the campaign itself was developed by over half a dozen initiating organizations. And as I mentioned earlier, has now been endorsed by over 200 organizations. And if you're here and you're part of an organization that hasn't yet endorsed the platform, you can absolutely endorse. You can go onto our website and fill out the endorser pledge in order to express your support for the platform. And if you're just an individual who supports this platform and you want to get involved, then you can do that through the voter pledge itself. And that voter pledge will send an email to the 4 candidates or more in your riding, calling on them to support this platform and letting them know that you're a voter in their riding that will be voting in accordance with this platform. And we also have on the website a candidate questionnaire for candidates themselves to endorse the platform. So now, without further ado, I am going to hand things over to the incredible lineup of speakers. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Yipeng. Dr. Yipeng is a primary care physician and public health practitioner and has studied the structural and colonial detriments of health in both the settler colonial contexts of so-called Canada and of occupied Palestine. So I'll pass it over to you, Dr. Yipeng.
Thank you, Yara. Good evening. Thank you to the organizers for this really important campaign, and for all of you for attending this virtual rally and taking the time to participate and to do what you can to help end Canada's complicity in this ongoing genocide in Gaza. The genocide in Gaza is taking place on the backdrop of an existing 18-year Israeli blockade on the Gaza Strip and 77 years of the ongoing Nakba, the process and structure of Zionist settler colonialism funded and supported by the colonial and imperial West, including Canada. I was in Gaza a year ago working in multiple primary care clinics, and what I witnessed with my own eyes was forced starvation of an entire population amounting to genocide. I took care of patients who were on the brink of death from severe malnutrition and dehydration. Days after I left Gaza, we learned of official confirmation of deaths of multiple children from severe malnutrition. The clinics that I worked at no longer exist because of the Rafah invasion by the Israeli military, which intensified in May of last year. I visited the European Gaza hospital in Khan Yunis and saw multiple cases of young children between the ages of 6 to 10 years old who had sniper gunshot injuries to the head and chest inflicted by the Israeli military, and a young child with full body burns because of an Israeli airstrike. This was a year ago. After the Israeli military broke the ceasefire and resumed heavy airstrikes and bombings on the entirety of the Gaza Strip on March 18th, I reached out to a handful of friends and colleagues working in healthcare in Gaza. They didn't have the words nor the language to articulate the gravity of the genocidal violence inflicted by Israel on the Palestinian people and children in Gaza. It is hell on earth. It is so monstrous and horrific, it is indescribable. So I won't describe to you what healthcare workers saw in the emergency room as mass casualty events happened with patients pouring in after the airstrikes. I won't describe to you the feeling of the bombings on the ground resulting in an earthquake that everyone felt, making it feel like the end of the world. There are ample videos and photos documenting these things. I feel like I don't need to tell you about the attacks on healthcare and humanitarian aid workers because they are well documented and can be found online. With over 400 aid workers killed, including 289 United Nations staff killed, 34 Palestinian Red Crescent Society staff killed, and 76 other NGO staff killed. MSF workers have been killed, including 9 staff members, with their staff housing being targeted by Israeli airstrikes, as well as their vehicles and ambulances. 7 World Central Kitchen workers were killed as their convoy was repeatedly targeted by Israeli airstrikes. They were killed exactly a year ago yesterday. Most recently, 8 Palestinian paramedics were killed by the Israeli military, along with 6 civil defense workers and a United Nations staff member, and their remains were found in a mass grave 2 days ago. I don't need to tell you about the over 1,400 healthcare workers killed or the hundreds still abducted by Israel and held in torture camps, including Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, a pediatric doctor and the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital in Gaza, who has been abducted by Israel for over 3 months. I think you already know this. I want to tell you about Mohammed and Abdullah, the 2 Palestinian drivers, ambulance drivers, who I met while in Gaza. They drove myself and others around, risking their own lives to make some money to feed their families. They shared bread and water with me, even though how scarce these things are. They wish they could have offered us more and hosted us better, as we were their guests on their land. In March of last year, after I left Gaza, the Emirati maternity hospital in Rafah, where I first stayed while I was there, was bombed, and their friend, who was the head of the paramedic unit, was killed along with 11 others. Every day, I worry about the safety of Mohammed and Abdullah and everyone else in Gaza as this genocide continues without meaningful action by the international community to end the genocide or to hold those accountable. I've been messaging Mohammed and Abdullah over the past few days, and they have told me about how difficult it is to even feed their children on certain days, and that their children go hungry. And I don't know what to say or reply with. I am without good words. They tell me they miss me. They tell me about how their brother and other relatives are martyred in a nearby bombing. They tell me about how they have been living in tents for over 10 months now. They ask me how I'm doing. How can I reply? Nothing I experience can even compare to a fraction of their struggle and steadfastness. They tell me if I visit again to not forget about them and to remember to bring chocolate for the kids like I did last time. My soul weeps for them. They are Palestinian men, similar to the paramedics and civil defense workers who are on the front lines of this genocide. And Israel continues to target and kill them because Palestinian men have been so systematically dehumanized and vilified for simply wanting to live life with dignity, self-determination, and liberation from occupation. Since March 2nd, Israel has again blocked all aid entering Gaza, including fuel, food, water, and much-needed medicines and supplies. It is now exactly 1 month since aid last entered Gaza. Healthcare worker volunteers have also been repeatedly denied entry and further restrictions placed on what they can bring in. Humanitarian aid and international healthcare workers are not a solution. A Palestinian-led healthcare system that is sovereign and self-determined is what is needed, but Israel has targeted and killed over 1,400 healthcare workers, including some of the most senior doctors and specialists. There are horrific and endless stories of children being torn to pieces and entire families extinguished by Israeli bombs and war technologies brought to Palestine from the colonial and imperial West, including Canada. While Israel continues its colonial ambitions, companies are profiting from selling war. These companies are in our own neighborhoods and cities. For example, the engine sensors produced by an Ottawa-based gas stops company is being used to build F-35 warplanes that are made in the United States and sent to Israel to drop 2,000-pound bombs on children. A society that profits from military and war technologies being used to actively genocide and extinguish an entire population of people is a deeply unwell, sick, and evil reality. No matter what your politics or values are, this reality ought to be deeply frightening for us all. We must collectively oppose this reality, and we must do everything we can to end Canada's complicity in this genocide. We all have a role to play in ending Canada's complicity in the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Free Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yipeng, and thank you for all the work that you and other healthcare workers have really been doing in terms of I think building a really important movement here in Canada, in the United States, around healthcare workers standing with Palestine. So I want to pass it along to our next speaker, Judy Rebick. Judy is a longtime feminist activist, writer, journalist, and educator. She's also a member of Jews Say No to Genocide. So Judy, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my computer. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my computer today. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Doctor, for everything you've done and the courage of going and working in Gaza. I have, usually when people invite me to speak at things lately, they want me to draw on my long history. I have 60 years now. I've been an activist. And I'm Jewish myself, and I went to visit Israel in 1970, and I was really horrified by what I saw. It's what my Palestinian comrades call the good old days, but 1970, it wasn't as bad as it is now. But Palestinians sat in the back of the bus. Nobody used the word Palestine. It was just Arabs, and had to go in to rooms separately, to public buildings and separate entrances. And it was like the United States, I didn't yet know about apartheid in South Africa, but I did know about it in the Southern United States because of the civil rights movement. And as a Jew, I was pretty horrified by how aggressive and militarist. And I mean, in 1970, everybody was sexist. If you were a young woman on the streets of anywhere in the world, you were going to get harassed. But Israel was the worst, like really the worst. So, so I've been a critic of Israel for a long time, but back in 1970, as a Palestinian elder told me, everybody knew the story of Israel, Exodus story. And nobody knew the Palestinian story. And so it was very hard to organize. So I didn't really get involved in organizing around Palestine until the occupation of Jewish women during the last, until I went with a mission to Palestine in 2002 during the Second Intifada. And that's when I decided to become an activist on the issue. So I guess what I want to say is I'm really happy that Vote Palestine is doing this, because I think the power of the movement in the streets has been phenomenal. I've never seen anything like it in my life. How well organized it is, how global it is, how diverse it is, how loving it is, even as much as it's attacked as a hate movement. I found the opposite. I found caring people who care for each other and are in support of each other. But I think the weakness of the movement has been that it hasn't entered into mainstream politics enough. And so I really think what I think it was Yara who said at the beginning, the importance of bringing this issue and making sure it's a central issue in the election is really, really important. And making politicians know that it's going to affect their votes. How people vote is really important. And I know you can get a lot of backlash from people who'll say, well, we have to stop the right wing and vote liberal. And most of the people who support the whole platform are either NDP or Bloc Québécois or Green. But it's wrong, right? Because first of all, the liberals are now pulling way ahead, if you're worried about that. And I am. I mean, I think it'd be better for the liberals to win than the right. But nevertheless, we have to, in moments of election, and this moment is Canadians are more mobilized right now than I've ever seen them paying it. No, since the last Quebec referendum, paying attention to politics. People actually feel their strength, in they want to boycott American products. I mean, for example, in my family, there's people who, despite the fact that I'm in my family, there's people who don't just never do anything politically. But now they're buying Canadian, right? And so I'm saying my family just because if it's after all the years of me being an activist and my relatives not giving a hoot about politics, suddenly they want to do something, right? To contribute to standing up to Trump. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And it means that and I had people like, a guy in my local pharmacy who I've been seeing for years, and he's very friendly. Hello, how are you? First time he ever talked politics to me. Okay. So there's a change in the atmosphere in Canada, and people are feeling like they can make a difference, which usually they don't feel. And so it's really important to talk to them about Palestine, to talk to politicians about Palestine, to let your politicians know that this is an important issue to you, and to talk. And if we can do canvassing, that's the best way to talk to people. And I find, and I do this a lot, and I do it also in the Jewish community, the extent that I'm there, is not to just not fight with people, but to find out what they think and then to question them on what they think. Because nobody can defend Israel. Like it's impossible to rationally defend Israel, right? It's impossible without out and out racism. And so if you question someone about they still feel uncomfortable supporting Palestine or because they believe the charges of anti-Semitism, and I'll end on that. By questioning people, maybe you can get somewhere. But even if you can't, in an election period, it's important to show the power of the movement and that it has a power in mainstream politics as well as on the streets. I think that's really, really important. The other argument I get from people is, oh, you're going to do what the Americans did. They didn't vote the Democrats because of the issue of Palestine, and now we've got Donald Trump. Well, first of all, the fault there doesn't lie with the people who didn't vote Democrat. It lies with the Democrats. That's first of all. And second of all, we have other parties. We just don't have just two parties, right? So we have way more freedom about the way we vote than Americans have. And that's really important. So it's not just how you vote. It's also that this is an issue and it's important, and Canadian politicians have to pay attention to it, even in an election where all anybody can talk about is Trump. And I don't know if people saw the announcement today, but Trump held off the tariffs. I mean, there's still tariffs against Canada, but held off the tariffs he's applying to the entire world, right? So, so anyway, I guess, and the last thing I want to say is I was trying to think of a similar experience that I had in all my years of activism. And I remember in the 1984 election, and this is in early days of the feminist movement. And, you know, nobody knew, none of the politicians knew anything about feminism, but somehow the president of the National Action Committee managed to get a leaders debate on women. And all three leaders were terrible, you know, on women's issues. They didn't understand anything about women's equality. I mean, all of them lost the debate. Maybe the NDP guy was a bit better. But nevertheless, it established the feminist movement as a force, political force in the country. And that's what I think a visible campaign in the election for Palestine and support for the demands of the Palestine platform could do for the Palestinian movement, which is I think the biggest hope we have right now in the world is this movement, which is globally organized and diverse with people from every part of the world working together. And it kind of shows what you can do when you care and when you're willing to fight for what you believe in. So thank you for asking me to speak.
Thank you so much for joining us, Judy, and for all of these reflections that you have from the feminist movement, and also thinking about the importance of getting out there, organizing, talking to your neighbors, really like seeing the election as a key moment for us to actually build this movement to be a larger and more powerful movement. So I would like to introduce our next speaker, which is Nate Prier. Nate has been the president of the Canadian Association of Professional Employees since January 2024. And CAPE is the third largest federal public sector union with over 28,000 members. So I'll pass it over to you, Nate. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks, Yara. I'm here with CAPE. I'm bringing solidarity from our 30,000-ish members. I'm really thrilled to be here tonight. It's an important moment. Right in the middle of a federal election, and it's just 2 weeks after Israel has relaunched its genocide in Gaza, so it's timely. But now that the U.S. election is over, Israel's broken the ceasefire deal, as others referred to. They refused to start talks on the second part of the deal. They've instead chose to launch new airstrikes against Gazans as they return to their homes. And just earlier this week, Israel bombed and destroyed the last remaining hospital in Gaza. So the scale of the violence inflicted on Israel, or by Israel on Palestinians, is just beyond belief. And Canada is obviously directly enabling these atrocities. We're continuing to sell arms to Israel. Our leaders continue to defend Israel on the international stage and then block efforts to hold it accountable for its, documented war crimes. But the last couple of months show that elections do kind of matter. They might not be the decisive form of power that liberates Palestine, but as Yara said, it's a critical moment to force an issue, to make politicians respond in a moment where they're particularly vulnerable, and connect those fighting for liberation more actively. But you're all here because you kind of know that. You're here because you believe that we need to force the federal government to listen to the majority of Canadians. Poll after poll has shown that almost every day, people think that Israel's genocide is abhorrent, and they want our country to have nothing to do with it. But our ruling class is out of touch, and it's our job to show that there's power in numbers. I represent, like I said, close to 30,000 federal public sector workers, and my members know that Palestine isn't just a foreign policy issue. It's a fundamental question of justice, of morality in our time. It's not just that, though. It's an issue that affects our working lives. It affects our jobs. Our members have been singled out repeatedly. They've had their jobs threatened. They've had their speech restricted, to the point that we've launched a fundamental charter challenge to do away with the entirety of the very abused public sector codes of values and ethics that, of course, falls selectively, and this will be familiar to a lot of you, falls selectively on the heads of Palestinians and their supporters the hardest. Palestine, also affects our homes, our communities, how much money we have in our pocket, how much we can speak out for any type of change that we might want. So to talk about the tariffs a little bit, just today, of course, was another big salvo of new tariffs in Trump's economic war against countries like Canada and also many other countries. The tariffs on Canadian goods are going to cause enormous damage to our economy. It's already starting to happen. It's not just a theory. Thousands of people are going to lose their jobs. Tens of thousands more are going to be affected. And their families and their communities are going to suffer because of that. So in the face of Trump's tariffs and, these ridiculous threats of annexation, a lot of people are advocating for a Team Canada approach. Often like union leaders, corporate CEOs, they come together and demand more funding, more government support for industries, maybe boycotts of American goods and services. You know, such that boycotts are fine. But the bigger issue here is that like a lot of the Team Canada approach means that we're shoring up support for industries that include weapons manufacturing, weapon systems, spy tech, you know, surveillance tools, and a lot of other, you know, goods and services that enable the ongoing illegal occupation of Palestine. And we know that like Canadian-made bombs are dropping on Palestinians. Critical components of Israeli jets are being made here in Canada. Canadian drones, Canadian software is being used to spy on and assassinate Palestinians. So, you know, any calls for industry bailouts have to also be a screen for industries that prop up genocide and colonization. Any government support that we're handing out here should be measured against whether those industries directly prop up Israel. You know, if we're trying to like reimagine the Canadian economy, de-link as they say, this should be a huge moment for cutting ourselves out of the business of fueling settler colonialism. You know, here and abroad, but especially in Israel. And let's be clear, like we need to reimagine our economy. The United States is our biggest, it's our closest trading partner. It's like 60% of our international trade. The United States and, you know, its economic influence, it impacts everything we do. And that's a big reason why Canada is such a stalwart, you know, defender of Israeli apartheid. So, you know, despite the ICJ's ruling that at least it's plausible that Israel is committing genocide, we know it's a genocide, and that Canada's support could mean that we're guilty of supporting war crimes, we're still supporting Israel. Why? Because despite all the evidence, despite all the risks, Canadian politicians are not going to break with the US. You know, we of course have a major thread of homegrown Zionism here, but that US kind of factor is like a decisive factor that we can't ignore. And, you know, our largest trade partner now is not just kind of like being the imperial dog that it usually is. They've become incredibly unreliable to us. They've declared a trade war against us. So now is the time to break with the US in order to survive. You know, and people are talking that way, but we need to get serious about this. And that's going to come from the labor movement, but that's going to come from people on the streets as well. We're going to need to forge, you know, trade partnerships with new countries. We're about to spend billions restructuring industries. And that shouldn't just be like a blank check, right? We should impose conditions. We need to break with imperialism. We need to break with the US-dominated world system right now. And it's dictating who should be Canada's allies and who should be our enemies. It means that we need to like drop the blind allegiance to the US and their support for Israeli apartheid. So instead, we should be, you know, partnering, of course, on principles of justice and equality. There's an economic angle to that now. We need to invest in our own workers, our own industries. You know, instead of manufacturing all those bombs for Israel, Canada should manufacture socially useful things. Unionized workers in those industries, you know, they've been calling for converting factories to manufacture things like electric buses. Canada's public transit systems, if we're going to talk about buses, are just like horribly underfunded. And we're relying on American companies to build all those vehicles. So like that's just one example, but I think we could think about this and expand that a lot. And Canada's manufacturing sector, like the fact that we're not going to be as integrated with the US, most likely, we'll see what happens, but this is a moment to like retool and support our population. So, you know, like the economy's on everyone's mind this election. So I think it's worth pointing out that like Canada's support for Israel doesn't really make financial sense. Just look at like the rabidly Zionist pro-Israel charities in Canada, you know, like CIJA, the Canadian Institute for Jewish Affairs, B'nai B'rith. Honest reporting Canada, who's targeted CAPE quite a bit. The Heseg Foundation, you know, from Indigo. These groups lobby for pro-Israel policies. They attack Palestinians and they attack people who are supporting Palestinian solidarity. They try to get them fired from their jobs, often successfully. And they even provide funding for Canadians to go serve in Israel's army, if we're talking about Heseg. You know, there's like 100 charities that receive tens of millions of dollars in public funds through their taxable donations. So, you know, why are we subsidizing these racist attacks and these war crimes? How many voters would rather that money be spent, you know, on public education or healthcare during a national crisis? Anyway, since, you know, October 2023, governments around the world, employers around the world, in Canada as well, have attacked workers, have attacked citizens for daring to express solidarity with Palestinians. Like I said, we've seen this with our own members. The Treasury Board, you know, the central agency that kind of governs a lot of how the civil service runs, It's pushed a definition of anti-Semitism, the Yara definition, that tries to censor and prohibits Palestine's solidarity in a lot of ways. Individual departments, federal departments, have asked workers not to use watermelons in their profile pictures. CAPE members who participated in demos or who spoke at rallies, they've been called into disciplinary meetings with their employer. They've had their jobs threatened, and like I said, they've had their speech massively restricted. They say, if you want to keep working for the government of Canada, you will never speak about Israel again. Like I said, we're doing a charter challenge on that that's trying to get rid of the entire code of values and ethics because they went over the line. But anyway, because like those workers, our members, have a union, they're able to defend themselves a lot, and so far we've been able to protect their jobs. So if you don't have a union, you should start one. Give us a call. But anyway, we're seeing increased repression on Palestine's solidarity. A lot of cities, including Ottawa, where I live, they're giving out fines for using megaphones, for marching on the street during Palestine demos. A lot of cities, like Ottawa, have created bubble zones, quote unquote, that make protests completely illegal inside, an area that they kind of just outline on the map. The ostensible reason that they have this is to protect vulnerable infrastructure like schools and churches and hospitals. But it's been used over and over and over again to block protests that oppose Israeli army recruitment events at community centers, like some of the other speakers mentioned, and many other things just that are Palestine solidarity actions. So I think ask your politicians that you're doing this campaign work on, why are these zones needed? Why now? Millions of Canadians are fed up with this. They've been watching our politicians champion a genocide that's been live streamed to us every day. And we know that laws that restrict protest, freedom of speech, they always get expanded. All the 9/11 stuff in the US and here has been expanded in a lot of ways. And it gets used against the labor movement. That's what always happens. Unions, the right to strike especially, is kind of the most powerful weapon that working people have to change society. And fundamentally that shouldn't lie with the courts, but if that right gets stripped, all of a sudden we are way less likely to be able to act on a strike. We were going to need higher levels of organization, no doubt, and we're working on that at CAPE. But governments are always trying to find ways to limit and undermine the right to strike. I think just look at the postal workers, the dock workers, any other major strike basically in Canada recently. I'm really inspired to be here tonight. Thank you for what you're doing here. You're working together to reach thousands of voters and speak as one voice. In the labor movement, we know that there's power in numbers, of course. So I'm going to applaud all of you in this work, and I'll be joining you to build a power kind of big and strong enough to force our government to finally cut ties with Israel, until Palestine's free from the river to the sea. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nate. And, really just a reminder of the importance of the labor movement historically in the fight against colonialism, against imperialism, against systems very much like the one that we're seeing today unfold against the people of Palestine. And we've seen over the last 17 months, labor movement move into action, whether that be joining worker contingents, joining protests, or even workers refusing to load weapons, right, onto ships destined for Israel. And so this kind of work is really critical, but it's also really critical that we're able to fight for an arms embargo at the level of the Canadian government, right, and work together in order to confront Canada's ongoing complicity. And then on that note, I'll pass it along to Caroline Brouillette. Caroline is the Executive Director of Climate Action Network Canada, which represents over 180 climate and environmental organizations across the country. CanRAC is an endorser of the Palestine platform. Caroline, we're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Yara, and all. I'm really touched and honored to share space with such amazing speakers by hearing the heartbreaking stories of what is going on and what is continuing to happen in Palestine and Gaza, and also really energized by the action and enthusiasm that we're seeing from folks in the chat here and more broadly by how the Palestinian youth movement has created such a powerful powerful force. So as Yara shared, Canada is the country's farthest reaching network of organizations working on climate issues. And what I wanted to tell you about tonight is why, as climate activists, we are here in solidarity and, dare I say, in coalition and with our full support of the Palestinian youth movement and of this campaign. Our work, our fight is motivated by our deep commitment to achieve climate justice. But that also means racial and social justice and certainty that this can only be achieved if everyone's human rights are upheld. There really cannot be climate justice without human rights. And I think as a network of organizations working in a state built on colonialism, we recognize the importance of decolonization everywhere. And that means here at home and abroad all over the world as well, including in Palestine. Climate justice and human rights and the rights of indigenous peoples are inextricable. We know, especially as a movement that works in spaces where multilateralism and international cooperation is essential, that until the conventions and institutions to protect the most fundamental human rights are respected, international cooperation on tackling the climate crisis will remain fragile, incomplete, and incoherent. War has played and continues to play an outsized role in worsening the climate crisis. And I won't go into the details here, but we are seeing, as always, that oil and gas companies are there, never far, and ready at every turn to benefit from colonial devastation again. So most of all for us, showing up to state loud and clear our opposition to Israel's genocide on Gaza and Canada's complicity in it is not only about the intersection of our struggles, but it is about our common humanity. And the fact that we cannot be free until everyone is free, and our duty as citizens and peoples in Canada to engage in our democracy. I'm really fired up and inspired by how this campaign, the Vote Palestine platform, is kind of thinking about this as an exercise to build power at a critical moment where there's an opportunity to influence candidates, to influence parties, and yeah, for us to flex our democratic muscles and say that this is absolutely unacceptable for Canada and for parties to continue our complicity in this horrific devastation. And so that's why I'm seeing many comrades from the climate movement on the call. I know that many of you have already endorsed the platform, but really want to encourage CanRAC members and allies and folks in the broader climate movement and community to endorse the platform and join this movement by activating supporters to take on the pledge. I think our movement has long lists of supporters and also maybe not a history, but we're used to organize during elections, and so this is really an opportunity for us to show our solidarity. I'll just stop here and keep it at that, but thank you so much. Merci beaucoup, folks, and look forward to continuing collaboration on this.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and thank you. You know, I think it's really great to see a climate movement that's thinking about and working on anti-colonial, like within the anti-colonial and anti-imperialist struggle, right? It's really critical, and I think it's you know, we see in the case of Israel how like the role of greenwashing and trying to position Israel as like this pro kind of environmental actor, and so the existence of organizations within the climate movement that are able to counter that has been really critical. So thank you so much for all of your work and for being here with us today. So I'm going to now invite my co-organizer, Emma, on for us to get into how we can organize through this federal election and build power behind the Palestine platform. So I'll pass it over to you, Emma.
Yeah, thanks, Yara. I'm just going to ask, I think the slides, perfect, are going to be shared. Hi, everyone. It is so nice to see so many faces, so many familiar faces, and so many new faces. My name is Emma. I'm also actually a climate organizer, and I am on the national coordination team of the Palestine Solidarity Network. Many of you might be familiar with the Palestine Solidarity Network. We have over 60 riding level groups all across the country that have been building power in their neighborhoods and in their communities for the past 2 years now, and really kind of seeing this as a critical moment in order to reach sort of beyond the choir and talk to people who are being politicized for the very first time on the issue of Israel's ongoing genocide in Palestine and its apartheid. And so I'm going to talk through with Yara many of the ways that we can actually use this window, as we've been saying, in order to build power. So this is why we're all here tonight, is to talk about, you know, we don't see elections, again, as the path to liberation, whether for Palestinians or for any of us that are living here in so-called Canada. And yet we know that they are moments where people are being politicized, where they're paying attention to the news, where they're paying attention to politics and to issues. And these are critical moments, not only for us to leverage power, but for us to invite people in to our movements, and most importantly, into organizations, in order for us to continue to be able to exert power well beyond the election. So I've been looking at the very, very active chat, and a lot of people saying things like, well, what if we end up with a liberal government? The liberals, have proven themselves not to be incredible, obviously, on Palestine in the past couple of years. Or how do we keep out the conservatives? Or how do we make sure that there are NDP candidates that are in office? And those are important questions, no doubt. And yet, what this platform and what this campaign, again, is all about is how are we continuing to bring more and more and more people in every single day in order to strengthen our power as a movement, so that we can continue to hold those people in office accountable, regardless of who they are, and continue to wield our political power. And so with that, I just want to talk about, before we get into tactics, really the importance of taking action collectively. All of you are here likely because you signed a pledge, you were invited in through that, and that's great. But when we talk about building power, what we really mean is taking action alongside other people and constantly growing our ranks by bringing new people in. So regardless of what it is that you might be doing, of however it is that you are engaging with the Vote Palestine campaign, with the Palestine platform, part of this is about gathering people's contact information, being able to engage them, asking friends, family, coworkers to take action alongside you. And if you don't yet belong to an organization, Rachel is going to post this in the chat. There are so many organizations all across the country that you can join. So you can see if there is already a Palestine Solidarity Network group that is organizing in your local riding. Please check that Action Network link there. If you're a trade unionist, as Nate is, you can join Labor for Palestine. If you are a Jewish organizer that is fighting for Palestinian liberation, please join an IJV chapter. If you're a Palestinian youth, please look at the Palestinian youth movement. There are incredible organizations all across this country, and that infrastructure is what will ensure that the power that we're building is lasting and durable, because those are structures that we can then leverage. So I really, really want to emphasize that and the importance of joining an organization. Okay. Now I'm going to pass this over to Yara to kick us off on the tactics and the ways to start building power behind this campaign.
Thanks, Emma. So we're going to talk about 5 key tactics that you can take action on, either individually or with a few friends, or like Emma said, really importantly, with an organization or as part of an organization. And you can participate in these tactics no matter whether you plan to vote, or whether you don't plan to vote or who you vote for. So these are just mass tactics that this campaign is really, really relying on in order to make Palestine a key election issue. So we're going to first start off with organizing with pledges. You've heard us now talk about the pledge a couple of times, but the pledge is really important because it's how individuals can express their support for the Palestine platform. So when you sign onto the pledge, the automatic emails are actually sent to your local candidates, basically encouraging them to officially endorse the platform, letting them know that you're a member of their riding, you're a constituent within their riding that is going to be voting Palestine this election, right? Palestine is going to be a key determining factor in how you vote. And so this pledge does a few things. First of all, the pledge count is public. And so political candidates and political parties can see the power that we're building. They've seen this power that we've been building over the last 17 months in the streets, in our communities, and now they can see it at the level of the election. Second, as I said, the email is generated to candidates who then forward it on to the party headquarters, asking them how to respond. And so really, we're creating kind of a wave within the electoral system simply through this pledge. And third, it allows us to see what ridings we have the most power in, where support for the Palestine platform may actually impact the electoral outcome, right? And that's really critical. And I think Rachel's going to drop a link in the chat now for everyone who's not signed yet to take the pledge and to let your local candidates know that you'll be voting Palestine this federal election. And once you do that, once you sign the pledge, send it to 5 friends, and let's together build a movement of tens of thousands of people through the federal election and beyond who are committed to building power for Palestinian liberation. You can send it to your friends through direct message on social media. You can forward it through chats. I know all of us here are in an abundance of WhatsApp chats. And so, let's take a few minutes here to make sure everybody has time to sign the pledge and forwards it. And everybody who signs the pledge, and this is really related to the point that Emma was just making around the importance of organization, the importance of working within a community, not just as an individual, is that once you sign the pledge, you'll also receive information about local organizing that's taking place. So you'll get emails to engage you in deeper organizing, and to allow for you to connect with other people who are just as passionate about this cause as you are. And so let's all also commit to checking on the pledge counter. I know for me, I've been looking at that pledge counter every day, refreshing my, browser. And so get used to checking the pledge counter and seeing how you can contribute to be really raising our numbers and becoming a champion of this pledge to push it out as far and wide. So maybe people can drop an emoji in the chat once you filled out the pledge and sent it to 5 friends. Let's flood this chat over the course of this call with commitments, not only for pledging, but also that we sent it to 5 friends. And I'll pass it over to Emma to talk about flyering and postering.
Yeah, thanks, Yara. I'm already seeing a lot of great suggestions for tactics and ways to build power in the chat. So yeah, keep those coming in. They're really, really awesome to see. And I know that there are many people who are already really utilizing the resources and materials that are up on the website. But for those who haven't taken a look yet, please open up all of the tabs and keep them open. And then, tomorrow morning be like, what exactly was it again? I was getting all of these things kind of thrown at me. But one of those things is flyers and posters. So we have an incredible team of volunteers who have been working on communications materials and who are consistently putting out new materials in order for all of you to use. So please use them. There are posters on our website that you can download and print off. A lot of public libraries have discounted printing. So that's a tip. And again, we encourage you to like go out and poster and flyer with groups of people as much as possible. These are really low barrier ways of taking action. But even just inviting a few friends to come out with you for a few hours in order to poster around transit stations, major farmers markets, places in high traffic areas in your city, in your community, is incredibly helpful and impactful. You can also do the same for flyering, right? So you can agree to go door to door and just drop off flyers in people's mailboxes, potentially in what you might think is a sort of key riding in your community, in your neighborhood, in order to help to bring people into this and encourage them to sign the pledge so that they, again, are engaged and welcomed into organizations. You can print piles of this off. I often, like during election season, leave the house with a backpack, and I have flyers and posters and everything printed and in my backpack and tape, and can just sort of like do that as I'm on my way walking to work or whatever it might be. So really encourage you to do that. And as you're doing that, if you can take pictures and be posting them to social media with the Vote Palestine hashtag or anything like that, that is really, really important and key to help build momentum and to encourage others to do the same. I think we do have like Canva templates as well for flyers. So many organizations are also adapting that content for their local context, and encourage you to do that as well. All right, back to you, Yara.
Yeah, okay, now I'm going to talk about potentially everyone's favorite topic, which is talking to candidates themselves. I know we've all been having a lot of fun with this for the last 17 months, right? Every time we hear of an event where our MP is going to be at, people have been organizing, just whether it be like canvassing or like flyering in that area, disruptions, so many like really important shows of power in our locales that have been taking place over the last 17 months to basically make it clear to members of parliament that if you support this genocide, we're not going to let you kind of walk around here in our neighborhoods without being met with questioning from your constituents. And right now, candidates are everywhere. They are probably going to be knocking on your doors. They might be coming to your workplace or your place of worship. They have campaign offices. So, online you can actually find out where their campaign offices will be. They might be walking down your street. In every riding, there'll be candidate debates, candidate fundraising events, and so on. And the great thing is that on the Vote Palestine website, you can actually see what candidates have pledged for the Palestine platform and which ones haven't. So you can see right directly if the candidates in your riding and which candidates specifically have not yet pledged for whatever reason, and make it a point to find them as they kind of canvass or fundraise or whatever, or if you see them walking down the street or you see them coming into your place of workplace or worship, and approach them directly and ask them directly what their position is on the Palestine platform. The more that candidates hear about the Palestine platform, the more they hear about arms embargo, about how important Palestine is as an election issue, the more they feed this information back up to the party machine, to the campaign headquarters, around the leader, and the more pressured that parties will feel, more pressured parties feel to really switch up their position on Palestine. And so asking questions to candidates, it can feel overwhelming, but it's really easy. Everyone can do it. And you can do it as many times as possible. Remember, these candidates are in your communities asking for your vote. So you actually are in a position of power. You absolutely get to go up to them and ask them, let's do some sample questions here. For example, saying to them, look, every major human rights organization has termed Israel's actions in Gaza a genocide. Will you commit Canada to stop buying and selling weapons to and from Israel? Right? So ask them directly, what is your position on a two-way arms embargo? We know that Israel is committing a genocide. We want to know your position. We saw that you haven't pledged to the Palestine platform. We want to know where you stand on this issue. And when you ask a question, one of the most important things you can do is document this interaction. So you can film it, you can take a photo, or you can even write about it afterwards, take it to social media, write about it, tag the candidate, and make sure to tag Vote Palestine. We've already been getting so many incredible submissions of people just going out in their neighborhoods and feeling empowered to go up to candidates and ask them these questions. And, you know, candidates, we've been seeing a range of different responses, but really asking these questions is so important. It's so effective. It's so simple. And actually, I think we are going to drop this in the chat any moment now. But we've created a detailed primer that will drop in the chat that basically, you know, gives you a template of questions that you can ask your candidate and how to go about asking candidates to what their position is, and seeing if you can get them to pledge onto the platform. And we'll move on to the next slide to just talk about how we can also gather endorsements from organizations. So we've also been working to gather endorsements from different organizations for the Palestine platform. And an organization can be any group. It can be a business, it can be a union local, it can be a mosque, or any kind of social justice or activist group. So if you're part of any group or organization of any kind, you can reach out to them and ask them to endorse the platform. I mentioned earlier on this call that we have nearly 220 endorsing organizations for the platform. And that's really, really important, because what it also shows is how broad and large this movement is. And, you know, we've seen that over the course of the last 17 months. We've seen people pour into the streets in the hundreds of thousands. We know that the Palestine movement is filled with people of all walks of life. You know, we just saw it here on this call today, right? The Palestine movement encompasses people within the healthcare sector, within the labor movement, within the feminist movement, within all kinds of communities, the environmental movement, and so on. And it's really important that this platform shows that, right? It shows our mass character as a movement. And so if you know of any local organizations, you can, if you go on votepalestine.ca, you can actually see exactly who's endorsed so far. There's a long list of endorsers there that's being regularly updated. And if you go there and you see an organization or a business, or, you know, any kind of like collection of people in your community that hasn't endorsed yet, please reach out to them, and let's get as many endorsements onto the platform as possible so that we can showcase the strength of our movement. I'll pass it over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Yara. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about canvassing, which some of you have already been chatting about in the chat, and which Judy mentioned. But before I do, I just want to do a bit of a review. So we've talked about 4 main things so far. So that is signing and sharing the pledge, ideally with 5 people, ideally with, you know, hundreds in all of your group chats, printing off flyers and posters and going out in your neighborhood and in your community, asking candidates questions, whether that's via email or attending all candidates' debates, attending their actions. One thing that I did locally is I sent my candidate an email, and I said, I really want to volunteer on your campaign. I think it's really important, and I actually think that you have, you know, the opportunity to defeat a candidate that I really see as not standing for Palestinian rights. And yet I'm not actually confident, and I don't want to volunteer until I know that you have endorsed this platform. And I think that's a really, really critical way to wield our power in this moment. What candidates rely on more than anything else is our donations and our time. They need our time in an election. They need us out knocking on doors. They need us, you know, leafleting and getting on the phones and everything like that to reach constituents. And it's really important that we say, look, this is a line for me. I will not volunteer on candidate campaigns who aren't fighting for Palestinian rights and freedoms. Okay, so asking questions of candidates and gathering endorsements, gathering organizational, union, business endorsements. That's a really, really key way for us to show that we have power. So I know for some local groups that are part of the Palestine Solidarity Network, they've done incredible work over the past 2 years, really mapping how it is and who their MP has power, like who gives them power. So it might be the queer community really gives this MP a lot of power and a lot of votes. That can help you to identify what organizations and businesses are maybe most important to go to in order to move specific candidates to endorse the platform. Okay. The next tactic, and to me, I think this is like so key, is canvassing, which essentially is, going out and talking to people, engaging with them on this issue and getting them to sign the pledge, committing to not vote for candidates who don't support Palestine in this critical federal election. All of you can do this, whether it's with a few friends or, again, with one of these local organizations. So we really recommend that a lot of these organizations are already planning canvasses fairly often. And if you're a part of a local organization that hasn't been canvassing yet, definitely encourage you to kind of integrate this into your own campaign planning at the local level. So I'm going to walk you through kind of some of the steps, what I see as sort of the most important steps in canvassing. So first, the point of canvassing is really to engage with people, right? It's educational in nature. It's distributing information about Palestine. But most importantly, it's about gathering people's information in order to plug them into our organizations, in order to then follow up with them and make repeated invitations to them to come and to join you, whether that's an event or another canvassing shift or postering shift or whatever it might be. So it's not just let's get someone's email on a list, it's let's get someone's email on a list in order to then bring them in and welcome them into our movements and our organizations. And that follow-up is so critical. So what you will often do if you're hosting a canvassing shift is you will print out the flyers and the pledge signups. PYM and others have created this incredible canvassing guide, which is also to be found in that organized section of the website. And that walks you through a lot of the things to consider and how to host a canvassing shift. But you'll print out this guide, you will print out flyers, and it's best to print out this paper petition. You can have QR codes as well to try to encourage people to sign the pledge digitally, but oftentimes people have tech issues, there's all kinds of things. It's like the QR code version of a menu. Like oftentimes people are like, give me the paper menu, please, myself included. So have paper petitions with you. Welcome people to a specific place. Oftentimes you'll be like, let's meet at this park. You're going to give them a bit of a script or some of the key things that they're going to be saying to people as they're chatting. And so give them a briefing, welcome everyone, learn each other's names and how they heard about your organization, and then pair people up to practice. It's really important that you have some time to go over this in a way that feels safe and comfortable with others who are on side in order to, again, just work through that script and feel comfortable saying it. And then what you'll do is you'll sort of pair people off, whether you're going door to door, or you could also do a canvas, outside of a transit station where you're just going up to people and saying, hey, can I have a minute of your time? I'm here volunteering with, whatever organization, and we're out today gathering pledge signatures, calling on people to only vote for candidates who are willing to commit to ending Canada's complicity in the ongoing genocide in Palestine. You often will want to kind of take a bit of a break halfway through, regroup. The key thing about canvassing is that we're learning, right? We're constantly learning. What's this neighborhood like? What are we hearing in response? How is this landing? How might we want to adjust what it is that we're saying? And it's really important to give people the opportunity to actually feed into that. Then you'll have an end time planned. You can regroup where it is that you began. And once again, use this as an opportunity. I've been volunteering on political election campaigns, and this is one thing that drives me nuts, is oftentimes they don't debrief. You need to debrief, because what you're saying to all of these people that have come out is, I value your time and I value your learning and your wisdom and what it is that you are finding out from people on the ground. That is really critical information to integrate, but also to tell people how important it is that they are finding out these things about our community and that they're connecting. So make sure to spend some time really gathering that intel and then integrating that into your next canvassing. And then finally, again, don't leave until you have everyone's contact information. So all of those volunteers that have come out, you should make sure that you have their email, you have their names, and that you have all of those pledge signatures, and you can send those to votepalestineca@gmail.com, and we can upload those for you if you have those paper petitions. So again, I know that was a lot of information, but you can find the canvassing guide online on our website. Take action and then organize, and it's down below. And make sure that you're printing out those petitions. Okay, I'm going to take a breather, and while I do, I think Rachel is going to launch a poll. So on your screen, you're going to see a poll that is asking you what kind of action you feel prepared to take on. And this isn't just like, oh, I'm kind of interested in this. Like, we're looking for hard commitments. We're like, yes, I am absolutely going to become a pledge champion. I'm going to pledge and I'm going to send it to people. I am going to, flyer and poster in my community. I feel committed to talking to candidates. Hopefully you're able to choose more than one thing. But please fill that out. Panelists, speakers, please do not fill it out. And then I'll pass it back. Yara, can you maybe let people know about the town halls, maybe as they're doing this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's going to be some town halls in your city. So if you live in the Greater Toronto Area, where we have election town halls in Toronto, Mississauga, Brampton, Milton / Oakville, and we're going to be hosting more town halls outside of the Greater Toronto Area. And the idea here is to come together to organize like all of these things that you're seeing in this poll. We're going to be talking about them, and we're going to be splitting up into groups and actually getting out and getting organized. And so you'll leave the town hall with a bunch of people that you'll be able to kind of be in the struggle with and organize with. And so look out for a town hall in a city near you, and hopefully we'll get some more locations coming out. And then also maybe while I do that pitch for the town halls, and while we get more of these numbers in, we'll also mention that on April 12th, and I saw somebody talking about this already in the chat, which is so great to see, but on April 12th, we're going to be taking to Ottawa for a national march. And one of the main demands of this national march is around an arms embargo. So we're going to this federal election not only kind of continue to mobilize in our cities against the genocide, but we're also going to be organizing all kinds of transportation, buses, car rallies, and so on from all across the East Coast, especially in order to go to Ottawa and have a national march on Parliament Hill. And I also believe that there will be some sister marches taking place all along the West Coast in Halifax and Prince Edward Island. And so, kind of keep your eyes out for the keep your eyes peeled for that, and we'll continue to send information about that. But yeah, I mean, this is so great to see. I'm looking at these poll results. We've got nearly 200 people who are committing to being pledge champions, right? Then 200 of you are going to forward this to 5 friends or more. I'm terrible at math, so if someone can do the math on that, but that's really exciting. And we're going to we have over 150 people ready to put up flyers and posters in your neighborhoods, 150 people who are ready to talk to candidates, and people who are ready to gather organizational endorsements and organize canvassing drives. So this is really, really great to see just how many of us are ready to kind of get out there and take action. So now, as we're starting to kind of gear up towards the end of this call, we know that for a lot of people, your question is still kind of, there's probably like this lingering question in your head of well, who do I vote for? And so we just want to really make it clear that we're not actually asking you to vote if you don't want to, and we're certainly not telling you who to vote for. Actually, the Vote Palestine campaign is not a campaign that's going to be endorsing any political party or candidate, but we can offer some information that is hopefully helpful to you, which is, of course, that in Canada, you'll be voting within your ridings, and it's through your ridings that you'll elect your member of parliament. And so It's the party that has the most MPs elected that's going to form a government, which means that it's really important to vote on the basis of the candidate, not necessarily the political party, because not all candidates in a political party are the same. Some candidates are going to be more for Palestine than others. I know, for example, that there's a chunk of liberal candidates that have pledged onto the Palestine platform, but then a C that still have it, right? Which shows that there are varying positions potentially within a single party. And so if you are really kind of keen to start to decide who to vote for, you can check the Vote Palestine website. It's votepalestine.ca/candidates. And I think we're going to drop that link in the chat. And you can actually see there which candidates have taken the pledge, whether they pledged in support of the full platform, or if it's specific platform points that they've pledged in support of. And I believe that there is either already or will be soon a tool up there that'll allow you to enter your postal code and see exactly who's taken the pledge in terms of candidates within your own riding. And then you can use that to look up your candidate's record on Palestine. And, only if you cannot find any information, then you may want to consider reviewing the political party's election platform for their position on Palestine. So, different people are going to tell you different things. Some people might say, well, we need to, I know Judy mentioned this earlier. Some people might be saying, we need to vote the liberals for reasons X, Y, Z, right? Other people might be advocating for voting for the NDP, but we just really want to be clear that that's not the position of Vote Palestine. We're really kind of advocating for you to take action within your communities, within your ridings, get organized, push the candidates as much as possible, as much as you can, and build power. And you can then use that data if you'd like in order to try to make an informed decision. But that's not what we're trying to do. Of course, we're trying to build a mass movement because we know that the minute that the election is done, no matter who wins, our work is not going to be done. And that we're going to continue to organize within our local communities. So on that note, I'm going to start to wrap us up by sharing a couple of reminders. So again, we've got, I think, 200 people ready to become pledge champions. So please sign the pledge, send it to your 5 friends. You also, we talked a lot about the importance of organization, joining an existing organization, building groups within your community to take action together. Our power is in numbers. It's in the mass movement that we've built over the last 17 months. And, with your newfound comrades, you can poster and flyer together in your community, canvas with the pledge in order to gather contacts and to grow your local organizing efforts. And of course, on April 12th, you can find a bus or hop in your car and make your way to Ottawa so that we can also take place in a national march calling for an arms embargo. So there's a lot of ways that you can get involved. And it's really important to kind of reiterate that we know that regardless of who's elected to government, our work is not going to be done, right? We're committed to the struggle long term. And we've talked about this quite a bit on this call, but this election is not going to be the end all of our organizing. We've been organizing tirelessly for 17 months to make Palestine an issue that has really kind of taken up so much discourse all across Canada, all across the world. There are millions of people across the world that are standing with Palestine. So many people across the country that have been moved into action, joined their first protests, gotten involved for the first time in the course of the last 17 months, and have committed themselves to the struggle. And our task is to continue the struggle into the election and after the election, in continuing to cultivate the communities that we've been building and to organize in order to make Palestine unavoidable this election and in the years that follow, to continue the fight for an arms embargo, but in the fight to end Canada's complicity in this genocide, and the fight for a free Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, everyone.